I don't know how much time you have and whether you want to talk about another one of them, but you asked about the GPO experience. One of the things that I got into as soon as I got to Florida was the Collaborative Federal Depository Library Program from ASERL. Are you familiar with that one at all?
I've heard of it.
So several regional documents librarians in the Southeast had put in an IMLS grant to look at whether there could be increased collaboration. And the IMLS grant was already underway, and they had already started doing some things together when I came, and they invited me to join the committee, steering committee, which I gladly did, and immediately said, well, the University of Florida needs to have one of these centers of excellence, which they were beginning to create, like to look within their collections of where were their collecting strengths. And so we joined immediately, not only me personally, but we created our own center of excellence around Panama and the Canal because we had a major collection and we're in the process of expanding that collection. And then the deans began to pay attention to it, and we had a meeting of the deans, and they all agreed that the depository collections were important, but there were real difficulties about the administration of them, and empowered us to try to develop guidelines that would be uniform throughout the Southeast. So one of the big burdens of the depository program, and I had tried to solve these problems from within GPO, so it was sort of funny to be solving them from outside, more easily and successfully, I might add. Although it's a lot easier to herd 12 regional depositories in 10 states than 49 regional depositories in, So, but we ended up, the way it worked, each regional had their own disposition rules. So if you were under one regional and you had things you wanted to discard from your collection, they would tell you you had to do it this way. And if you were under a different regional, they'd tell you to do that way. And so the first thing we did was we simplified it. And we said we all have to agree and we all have to have the same discard rules, so that it doesn't matter if you're in Alabama or Mississippi or Florida or Kentucky, we're all the same. And we got 12 depositories, regionals, to agree, and their deans. The deans made a big difference, not because they were down in the weeds enough to know how to settle it out, but because they empowered them to act and to act boldly. And then we had other selectives from these different states participating to say, these are the problems we're having, these are what we need you to solve. And then we were able to take on at UF, writing a program to automate the disposition process because the rules were common. So it's pretty easy to write a program to help you list your offers, things you want to discard, and for me to list my needs if it isn't going to be a different set of rules when I get to his library, So, so we have now, I want to say 38 libraries in the region who have created one or more centers of excellence around either a topic or an agency. So Ole Miss has a really amazing special collection that's the archives of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. So when they were looking at what collection within government documents would really make sense for them and be of high value, they chose the IRS, because the two things together each made the other collection more valuable. My colleague at Florida International University was already running the Digital Library of the Everglades. Understandable, she's in Miami, right? Sure. So she decided that she wanted to take a subject approach, and that if they were going to try to have this comprehensive digital collection about the Everglades, they should have a comprehensive print collection about the Everglades. So she took a subject approach. I don't care what agency publishes it, we're going to try to get a copy of every document that's associated with the Everglades. And she's a selective, so she's not even a regional, but nevertheless that collection was going to mean something to her and to her constituents. UF has taken on a fairly large number. I think we have over 35, but most of them are really small agencies, and a lot of them are defunct agencies. It's a lot easier to do a defunct agency because they're not continuing to publish. And some of that came about because we already had 300,000 pre-1976 government documents in storage, and a lot of them were these small ag units. And we had already committed to cataloging them. It's one of the commitments you made as a center of excellence is that you would catalog, and that you would seek to fill in the blanks in your collection. You'd seek to make the collection comprehensive. So we've done the National Commission on Libraries and the Office of Technology Assessment, both of which are places Judy worked, so you can understand maybe why those got selected. And the big collection we took on was congressional hearings, and that is a mammoth collection, and we're still cataloging our congressional hearings. But that's been a really interesting project. We had some pushing and shoving with GPO, maybe you'd say. We had some back and forth with GPO to get agreement that they would allow to do it. My instruction from my deans, my fellow deans, was to take this as far as I could, but not violate Title 44. So we sort of defined that as, if the law tells us to do something, we're going to do it. But if tradition or GPO regulation or any other thing tells us to do it, we may or may not feel obligated to do that. And so we did feel that we crafted a program which has worked really well. We're seeing a fairly steady exchange of publications among all the states. So it's not just like I just show to the people in my region, you know, what is being discarded in our region. I'm showing it to all 10 states and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, which report through me. So things are moving around. They're not just, if you don't get it used in Florida, it gets tossed out. It can go to Georgia, it can go to Kentucky. So it's been a really interesting
That's fascinating.
model. Yeah, we were really pleased. And you know, it did help that I had been at GPO and had spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to make it better.
Right.
And I understood what the law actually required as distinct from tradition, and you know, so.
Now, these are regional efforts.
Yep.
Do you see a future where we would have a national effort to encourage this kind of collaborative collection development?
We've also been involved in several shared print projects. And so we set up one really immediately when I arrived in Florida, called the Florida Academic Repository, which was looking at a collection for the state university system of shared print. And then simultaneously, ASERL, the Southeast Research Libraries, were working on a shared print project for the region, for the whole set. And we wanted FLAIR and ASERL to be complementary. So every journal that was recorded in FLAIR is also recorded in ASERL. So I did the same thing there. Out of self-interest, I developed the software so I wouldn't have to put reports in 2 different pieces of software for 2 different collections. There have been other print journal initiatives that have been going on in other parts of the country, and we started last year meeting together. So the West group, the CIC group, that's the now Big Ten Plus, and at some point ASERL merged with the Washington Regional Library Consortia, so we have Scholars Trust is the new name for that. So we now have these 4 or 5 consortia that are all looking at, we're the ones who are at the moment the biggest of the ones who are doing journals. You know, what can we do together? So I think it's so much easier to start these locally and regionally. I mean, the geography does make a difference. It makes a difference in the trust. If I'm going to rely on the fact that you have a journal that my people might need, it's a little harder to say to them, well, they'll send it from California, than to say they're going to send it from Georgia. You know, it's not insurmountable in this day and age with overnight shipping and digitization and other things, but the psychology of it. And then the fact that we're otherwise meeting together on a regular basis, so we've got personal relationships of trust and things. But now we're at a point where each of those groups is beginning to look at, can we harmonize what we're doing, can we share information? So not only is Scholars Trust and FLAIR using this journal software that we developed, but West is using it as well, and we're looking to see whether others want to do it. And it built on the depository thing, because one of the interesting things required by law in the depository program was this needs and offers business. But the guy who had done the programming for that did the programming for journal, and he was like, well, you guys are going to have needs and offers. You're going to have journal sets that are incomplete, and you're going to want to disclose what's missing. And if you're weeding and you're throwing away that journal based on the fact that I have it, but you have some of the volumes I'm missing, so it's got a needs and offers function built in. Which was part of what brought the West group, and they had other software that was managing other parts of their archiving, but they were very interested in participating in the idea that we could each help each other fill in the gaps.
This is really encouraging to hear all this, you know, cooperation.
Yeah.
It's really something. Jack, did you have any other questions?
No.
I did want to, in the interest of not missing anything, I was going to ask you to put yourself in Jack and my chair and ask, let me rephrase it, what question would you ask yourself?
Wow, that's a hard one always, isn't it? I think one of the things, and I tried to say this at the end of my presentation the other day, it's easy and perhaps tempting as a dean to see these opportunities and think that we can do all of them, and we can't. We all have limited resources, and I don't implement these things. I have to support them both financially and emotionally and otherwise, but there are people on my staff and people on the staff at the other organizations that are carrying the load. And they have to believe in them and be enthusiastic in them, and it can't weigh them down. So I think the question, I guess, becomes how do you decide, you know? And ultimately, a lot of those decisions so far, I mean, 2 of the projects already existed, and it was a matter of they've sort of grown, and it's a little easier to say, okay, can we pull in the Haitian law project when we're already doing dLOC? Can we pull in the Cuban law project? Now this step up to the Cuban digitization is a really big step up, and we are actually hiring staff and putting significant resources into that. So we had a lot of internal conversations about who's going to do this, how is it going to get done, let's not make a commitment we can't meet, this,
Right.
you know. So I think, you know, lots of opportunities come along, and trying to figure out which one is most beneficial to us, or which one can we make the greatest contribution so that we're kind of serving our role collectively in the community, that whether that's the local or regional community or nationally, that where University of Florida has a place. But it's never easy, you know, to say no to a great idea. You know, you think, oh, well, we could do this one too, and it's like, you know, trying to listen to my staff and to be realistic about, is this one worth taking on, and if so, how are we going to get the resources to do it? Because so often the people who are really good at this are the same people, and I'm sure
Yes.
you've all experienced
yes.
that, right? I mean, that you just have some phenomenal people, and they don't say no to anything either. So having a dean that doesn't good at saying no, and implementers who aren't good, is dangerous. So fortunately, we have a few other people who will, you know, kind of say, maybe we ought to finish this first, and I am a great believer in that. But things like dLOC, I don't think we'll ever finish. I mean, ideally it will continue to grow, but the growth is much less difficult because it's well established and well oiled, and it's moving well. It would be very hard, as much as the dLOC model appeals, it would be really hard to start it all over in another geographic area, just because you'd have to start up every partnership and all of the infrastructure. And so I don't know if that's really a fair answer to your question, but.
Well, I think certainly that's an issue to be concerned about, is, you know, making sure that when you have to make a decision, you need to take all these things into consideration, resources being one of the main things.
It's always a big
and
part of it.
it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy. So.
Well, and we all have a responsibility to our primary home, you know, and so it's really easy to see when the Latin American and Caribbean collection is one of our preeminent collections, and when Latin American studies permeates almost every college and the university in some form, why dLOC would make complete sense. The Depository program is maybe a little different, because as a regional we were burdened by this very large depository collection. We had colleagues who were burdened by them. And so that was maybe less about the subject matter, although we've tried to pick subject matter that was relevant to the university, but more about, if collectively we can reduce the burden, we can maintain our legal obligation in the program, but not have that being something that is weighing us down. Right. So different criteria by which you might judge, but.
Yeah, I think so. Judy, thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been fun to chat.
And,
Yeah.